Dear students, I welcome you all in today's lecture on David Easton's input-output analysis. Objectives of the lecture are to understand the basic model of political system as given by David Easton, to outline its basic features and components, and to have a brief critical analysis of Easton's model. Dear students, David Easton is first political scientist to have developed a systematic framework for the study of politics on the basis of systems analysis approach. It is he who introduced the concept of system to politics together with the vocabulary of inputs and outputs, demands and supports, and feedback during the early 1950s. He has selected the political system as the basic unit of analysis and concentrated on the intra-system behavior of various political systems as principal areas of research. He has defined political system as a set of interactions and politics as making authoritative allocation of values. David Easton's system analysis is also known as input-output analysis or conversion process. The most important feature of the input-output analysis is the conversion of inputs into outputs by the system. He argues that the political system absorbs inputs in the form of demands and authorities and supports from the institutions and political community and produces outputs in the form of policies and decisions. This is followed by what is described as feedback mechanism, through which the effects and consequences of the output are put back into the system as inputs. A political system, however, is not merely a set of processes which converts inputs into outputs as a routine matter. It is a complex cyclical operation with dynamism of its own. It has a purpose of its own towards which it tries to move, though at every stage it may have to face problems of stress and maintenance and may have to go through regulatory process. His theory of the political system, developed in great detail over the course of 2 decades, stands as the most imposing theoretical structure yet to emerge from the behavioral movement in the political science. No other behavioral theorist has spoken to so broad a range of issues, both methodological and theoretical. Easton has criticized the structural functional approach mainly on the grounds that it does not provide the concepts to deal sufficiently with all kinds of systems. Its main concept of function cannot be taken as a basis of theory and it cannot be experimentally applied because it lacks precision. Easton's theory is general in character for 2 reasons. First, he rejects the idea of constructing different kinds of theories to deal with national and international politics. He is keen on building a unified theory of politics for explaining the behavior of national and international political systems, and also for comparing them. Second, he states that the primary task of political science is to analyze the general problems that are common to all political systems, that is, analysis of the conditions under which a political system survives as a system over a long period of time. Further, Easton rejects the type of political analysis which is concerned with power relations between elements of political system. He is of the opinion that the benefits provided by political and governmental processes cannot be decided by the amount of power an individual power holder exercises. Easton's fundamental concept is that of political system as one of the subsystems of a society, which then operates within an environment. The environment, according to Easton, can be divided into 2 parts, intrasocietal and extrasocietal. The intra-societal environment consists of those systems in same society as the political system, but excluded from political system for the reason of not being engaged in authoritative allocation of values. The intra-societal system includes economy, culture, social structures, or personalities. These are segments of society of which the political system is itself a part. The extra-societal environment, on the other hand, includes all those systems which lie outside a given society, such as the international political systems and the international economic systems. They too have their impact on a given political system. The political system is linked with its environment through the process of inputs and outputs. The input function. In elaborating his input-output analysis, David Easton has chosen to deal with inputs from various environments in the form of demands and supports, conversion processes, outputs, and feedback mechanisms that inject the effects and consequences of output back into the system as inputs. He calls them as summary variable. The inputs which give political system its dynamic character and furnish it both with the raw material or information that the system called upon to process and the energy to keep it going are of two kinds, demand and supports. A demand, according to Easton, is an expression of opinion that an authoritative allocation with regard to a particular subject matter should or should not be made by those responsible for doing so. Demands is thus the raw material out of which finished products called decisions are manufactured. The demands may be of four types. First, demands for allocation of goods and services such as wage, hour laws, educational opportunities, housing and medical facilities, etc. Second, demands for regulation of behavior such as control over markets, provisions for public safety, rules relating to marriage, health and sanitation, etc. Third, demands for participation in the political system such as right to seek election, right to hold office, right to organize processes, right to petition public officials, etc. Fourth, demands for communication and information such as communication of policy intent from political elites or display of power of the political system in periods of threats or on ceremonial occasions. Along with the concept of demand, there are several major types of stress inherent in the political cycle. The overload is one such concept used by Easton. In other words, if we regard demands as message units calling for authoritative action, the problem of overload emerges as a central to demand stress. Overload of this kind can arise either from excess quantities of demands or from some qualitative elements in the nature of a particular demand, which are respectively called as volume stress and content stress. A political system has its own way of reacting to the challenges of the demands, and David Easton argues that political system has a regulatory mechanism which regulates the pace of entry of demands into the system or prevents the demands from entering the system. Every political system, argues Easton, possesses regulatory mechanism of its own in order to transform demands into issues and to determine whether a demand should become a matter for serious political discussion or remain to be resolved privately among the members of the society. According to Easton, there are four types of such regulatory mechanisms. The first one is that of a structural mechanism, which include informal political structures, which serve as gatekeepers at the boundary of a political system. They regulate the flow of wants entering the political system and becoming articulated demands. All political systems develop gatekeeping rules and operating rules to be followed by them. For example, political parties and pressure groups, which screen the demands flowing from the environment and decide which of them should be acted upon. The second one includes that of a cultural mechanism. Every society has a certain cultural mechanism and socio-cultural norms. The demands which are not in harmony with them remain unacceptable and are not articulated. The third one is that of a communications channels. A political system can develop a number of communication channels through which demands may be scattered widely and thus get diluted. Finally, there are what Easton calls as reduction processes, and demands can be regulated by various reduction processes during the conversion phase of political cycle. Through them, demands may be converted into specific issues for purpose of political processing, or without which they would not be fed the conversion process of the political system. For example, legislators, executive, and administrative bodies. Dear students, according to David Easton, supports are those structures or processes which give the political system the capacity to cope with the demands made upon it. Support means giving obedience and showing loyalty to a political system. It refers to the expression of willingness to accept particular value allocations or the processes by which that allocations are made. In other words, it refers to remaining input transactions between a system and its environment after demands have been abstracted. Easton, however, defines support by saying that, and I quote, A supports B either when A acts on behalf of B or when he orients himself favorably towards B. B may be a person or a group. It may be a goal, idea, or institution, quote unquote. The supports are classified into overt and covert. Overt supports refer to the actions that are clearly and manifestly supportive, while covert refers to supportive attitudes or sentiments. A political system receives considerable support from the environment, without which it cannot survive. Supports are of four types. First, material supports such as payment of taxes or other levies, and the provisions of services such as labor on public works or military services. Second, obedience to law and regulation. Third, participatory support such as voting, political discussion, and other forms of political activities. And fourth, attention paid to governmental communication and manifestation of deference or respect to the public authority, symbols, and ceremonials. The supports that are fed into the political system may be to a specific political object, or it may be an all-out support to the political community consisting of members of system seen as group of persons bound together by a political division of labor, or the regime or basic values, political structures and norms, or the political authorities holding power in any given time. The support may be to one or two or all of these various components of political system. According to Easton, the systemic persistence depends upon the maintenance of a minimal level of attachment for each of the three identified political objects. The political system may also cleverly try to counterbalance the lack of specific support by generating diffuse support through a sense of legitimacy and the feeling that there is a common or public interest furthered by the persistence of the political system. Different political systems follow different imperatives for developing and spreading a sense of community among its members. A political system thus maintains itself partly through its own regulatory mechanism and partly through the support specific as well as diffused, which it can generate in the society. Dear student, let's discuss the outputs of political system as analyzed by David Easton. Outputs, as already stated, are the decisions and actions of the political system. There are 4 types of the transactions on the output side, which correspond closely to the supports. These are extractions, regulations of a behavior, allocation of goods and symbolic outputs. Outputs not only help to determine each succeeding round of inputs that find its way into the political system. This process is described as a feedback loop. The feedback is an important type of response to suppress stress in a political system. It is a dynamic process through which information about the reactions of the people on the decision of the system is communicated back into it in such a way as to affect the subsequent behavior of the political system. Since a political system, according to Easton, is primarily interested in persistence, this information is essential to the authorities who take decisions for the system. David Easton calls it a flow model of the political system, as the political processes involve a continuous and interlinked flow of behavior. Dear students, let's discuss some major advantages of David Easton's input-output analysis. There are 2 distinct advantages in Easton's method of political analysis. First, it goes beyond the equilibrium approach and takes note of change and dynamism in the system. Concepts like disturbance, stress regulation, purposive direction, etc. enable one to analyze the processes of dynamism in the system. Easton makes a clear distinction between system maintenance and system persistence. His method being directed towards the study of systems persistence rather than to its maintenance only, Easton's claim is definitely oriented towards exploring change as well as stability. He is aware of the continuous exchange going on between the political system and the environments, and of the fact that the system is consistently engaged in a conversion process, producing outputs and altering the environment. Easton's analysis claims to take note of the system's adaptive process, as well as of redirection in the form of goal-seeking feedback. The second important advantage of Easton's analysis is in the field of comparative political analysis. This conceptual framework provided by Easton presents us with a nicely standardized set of concepts and categories which is logically inclusive and which makes it easier to bring broad and comparable overviews of entire political systems. At least theoretically, the method is not limited merely to a comparative study of certain types of political systems or to any specific variety of socio-cultural contexts. Oren Young has described Easton's input-output analysis as undoubtedly the most inclusive systemic approach so far constructed specifically for political analysis by a political scientist. Eugene Meehan has written that Easton has produced one of the few comprehensive attempts to lay the foundations for systems analysis in the political science. The fact of the approach being indigenous to political science gives it a distinctive advantage since it is able to deal with the various problems of applying systems analysis to political questions in a coordinated fashion without having to cope with the problems of adaptation. The basic element in Easton's conceptual structure are quite simple. He believes that political behavior consists of interactions between different parts of system acting as members of the system. In nutshell, Easton's input-output analysis in political science appears to be a very neat conceptual framework. However, several political scientists have listed some limitations in Easton's analysis, like, first, it is said to be too abstract and too far from empirical reality. His analysis confines to the question of location and distribution of power in the political system, but its capacity to deal with a wide variety of political phenomena is severely restricted. Oren Young thus rightly points out that the system approach does not have much to offer for studies dealing with the political aspects of such matters as perception, expectation, formation, or cognition. Because of high level of abstraction in input-output analysis, the realities of political life may not always be neat placed in systems model. Second, it's also said to have been developed as a conscious alternative to Marxism and is an anti-Marxist approach because Marxism generates a philosophy of revolutionary change and disequilibrium. In other words, revolutionary change is hardly mentioned, and even the possibilities of evolution of new system forms are not covered in detail in Easton's input-output analysis. It has been criticized for being a borrowed approach. Several critics advocate that Easton's system theory appears to have been generated as mere derivations from the classical economic theory. I.S. Sarzano observes, and I quote, "The Easton's model and the traditional economic approach share not only the notions of a system and input-output, but those of scarcity, allocation, competition, maximization, goal-seeking, and feedback as well." Further, it has been criticized for not highlighting the influence of parasystems. Easton's model offers no systematic way of analyzing parapolitical systems and the international system. Easton's concept of political system, identified through its authoritative allocations, is a narrow concept. Sarzano regards it as a limited hypothesis. Daniel Moore is of the view that by conceptualizing, unfortunately, a political system simply from the point of view of what it does or what should do, Easton seems to have rendered this concept of political system less useful. The input-output analysis has also been criticized for providing no reason for the authoritativeness of the political system. Easton fails to answer such questions like what makes the system authoritatively allocate the values and why does it convert inputs into the outputs. Thompson L. Thompson has criticized Easton for dodging answers to such questions. It has been observed by Claude Ake that the Easton system theory is ambiguous in several ways. The relation between the variables are not stated with rigor. It is difficult, if not impossible, to apply it to the study of the world, and the data gathered in the context of the theory will mean little, if anything. Easton's concept of systemic persistence and change have also been criticized by critics on grounds of precision. As Evans put it, Easton talks of persistence as the chief property of the political system, but he does not refer to the maintenance of the specific structure for this purpose. Another serious weakness of Easton's system approach is that it hinges on the system's automatic response to stress. Daniel Moore writes, and I quote, "Reading Easton, one gets the impression that he just does not consider the distinction between the goals of the individual or groups and those of the system," quote unquote. Easton's model gives a little place to the study of individuals or their groups. As Mackenzie holds, and I quote, "Easton has focused on politics as a matter of process and events rather than of individuals or groups," quote unquote. The Easton's model relegates the individual to the background, group struggle has failed to attract Easton's interests. Despite being hailed as most comprehensive, inclusive, and indigenous frameworks within political science, Easton's input-output analysis has been criticized as being too abstract, too narrow, and having a status quo bias. He seems to be concerned more with the questions such as persistence and adaptations of the political system, as also with regulation of stress, stability, and equilibrium, and thus advocates only the status quo situation. There is much less in Easton's formulation about the politics of decline, disruption, and breakdown in political systems, as Young points out. Despite all claims that the political system approach is designed for macro-level studies, Easton has not been able to go beyond North America and Western world. Easton's political system or input-output would deal only with the present and has therefore no perspective of the future and has less study of the past. Dear students, this was all in today's lecture. Hope you enjoyed it well. Thank you and have a nice time.